Thanks, everyone. Welcome back. We have a patient speaker now. I was told that it's a patient meeting. We need a patient speaker. So luckily, I had one at home. This is my wife, Lynda Tse. She's a long-term survivor of a glioblastoma, and she's going to share her story with you today.
The 5th of March 2006 was a Sunday. It is the day my life changed forever. My husband Chris and I had invited relatives over for Sunday brunch. I had been experiencing bad headaches all morning, as well as feeling a bit nauseous. I took one bite of brunch, rushing to the bathroom to vomit it all up. Chris took me to the after-hours clinic in Newtown. The doctor on duty told me to go home, take some paracetamol and contact my GP in the morning. He said that if we were in the US, he would be sending me off for a brain scan. The headache, nausea and vomiting continued throughout the night, and the next morning we saw our GP, who took one look at me and knew there was something seriously wrong. She sent me to A&E where I had a CT scan, and when the results came back, the emergency doctor on duty told me the scan showed a lesion. My new reality had begun. On the 9th of March, 3 days after being admitted to hospital, I had surgery to remove a brain tumour from my left parietal lobes. The pathology came back as a glioblastoma, or GBM, a grade 4 brain tumour. I was faced with the daunting task of telling our children that I had cancer. At that time, our daughter Cassandra was 13, had just started high school, and our son Nathan was 10 in his last year of primary school. I said to them, yes, I have cancer, but I've had great surgery and I'll be getting radiation and chemotherapy treatment to keep any tricky cells away. I could see that they were scared. Cassandra asked me if I was going to die. I replied to her, one day, but not for a long time yet. I didn't want to lie to them, but at the same time, I wasn't prepared to accept my prognosis and start preparing them for my imminent demise. This was partly due to because I felt so good. I no longer had headaches, and I remember thinking magically that everything would work out all right. One of my mantras during this whole time has been accept the diagnosis, but defy the prognosis. We humans are all individuals, not statistics. My oncologist laid out a treatment plan, radiotherapy and oral chemotherapy called Tumour. It is the same treatment plan people diagnosed with GBM receive today. But in 2006, Tumour was still very new and not funded by Pharmac, so we would have to pay for it ourselves. Chris and I had already decided we were going to fight this cancer, and so I consented to the plan and my treatment began. In Wellington at the time, there was a bubble of people with brain tumours. So many, there was enough to form a weekly support group at the Cancer Society. One of these people was Chris's cousin, Michael. Mike had been diagnosed with a glioblastoma about a year before me. We became close allies, calling ourselves the Brain Tumour Warriors. We went to support group meetings together, me with Chris and Mike with his mum, Anne. The meetings were good because we could all share our experiences and anything we had read about, any treat that was new or different. I remember a man had had gamma knife radiation overseas, and some people were trying acupuncture. This disease is a nasty beast, and sometimes there would be sad news and tears and grief at the loss of someone from the group, but also there were celebrations for clear scans. Sadly, Michael succumbed to the disease in 2007, aged 40, having survived 2 years from his diagnosis. I will always remember his courage and how he gave me hope and courage too. My 6 weeks of radiotherapy and daily Tumour was completed on the 30th of May 2006. The major symptoms I experienced was fatigue. My headaches were not too bad. And I had begun taking some supplements such as boswellia and bromelain to help me with the swelling to stay off the dexamethasone. A few weeks after finishing radiotherapy, I started on my next phase of my treatment plan, taking Timidar at a high dosage high dose for 5 days every month for 6 months at the cost of $5,000 per month. The high dose was more difficult to handle, and some days I suffered from extreme fatigue. After my second cycle, my platelet count dropped too low and I was forced to stop the Timidar for a few weeks. After my platelets came back up, I resumed the Timidar on a low dose and remained on that low dose for the remainder of my remaining cycles. About halfway through my treatment, Timidar became funded by Pharmac, which was a huge relief for us financially. At the completion of my 6 months of Timidar, I asked my oncologist, what next? I felt as though doing nothing would be just waiting for the tumour to come back, and I wanted to prevent this from happening. Rather than continuing the Timidar at full strength, my oncologist suggested an experimental protocol of metronomic Timidar plus Celebrex. This involved taking a low dose of Timidar, which would hopefully be less toxic on my platelets. I did this for a further 2 years before stopping all treatment at the end of 2008, apart from a few key supplements such as boswellia, melatonin, and curcumin. For many years, I had been making pig dolls for school fairs and gifts for my friends. This hobby and creative pursuit really helped in the early stages of my recovery. Being in the creative zone meant my mind was kept occupied and I could focus on creating and not dwell on my situation. I branded my designer pig dolls Piglets. A friend helped me create a website and I started selling a few pieces. Then in 2007, the Royal New Zealand Ballet commissioned a limited edition piglet for their new production of Cinderella. I designed a rose ballerina piglet and made 50 pieces, which were sold in the theatre before each show, along with other Cinderella-themed merchandise. It was so rewarding to see grandmothers buying piglets for their granddaughters, and I was told that the choreographer had bought one to take back to the UK. And I later found out that my GP had bought one for her daughter, not realising that I had made them. In 2008, I was well enough to go back to work. Initially as a teacher aide at our children's primary school, before resuming my kindergarten teaching career in 2009. I was now on annual MRIs. My scans continued to be clear and I remained relatively symptom-free, apart from the odd headache and hot flush, which my oncologist put down to symptoms of perimenopause. In February 2011, I completed the Wellington Round the Bay 7K fun run, for me, in my case, walk, to raise money for the Milligan Institute. A couple of months later, following another clear MRI, my oncologist told me I no longer needed to see him or have regular MRIs unless I experienced symptoms. I was discharged from the oncology clinic. It had been 5 years since my diagnosis. In the following 5 years, my health was relatively stable. Life was full. The children were thriving at school and university, and we managed some overseas travel. Physically, I was feeling fine, although I was having some ongoing issues with my balance. Prior to my brain tumor, I used to be able to enjoy riding my bike. However, gradually I found my cycling less and less. And one day I discovered that I was unable to balance on a bike properly at all. I didn't think much of it and continued to enjoy other forms of exercise, long walks around the Eastern Bays or through the trails of Mount Victoria and weekly Pilates classes. 2016, I did the Round of Bays again. However, a couple of months later, I tripped and fell down a flight of stairs. Since that fall, I have found going down steep stairs a problem. I also started to notice a few problems with my balance. Towards the end of 2016, I was diagnosed with stage 2 endometrial cancer and underwent a radical hysterectomy, followed by a course of brachytherapy. As it was my second cancer, the tumour tissue was sent off for genetic testing, and I was subsequently diagnosed with Lynch syndrome, a hereditary condition which increases your chance of getting certain cancers. People with Lynch syndrome have a 50% chance of passing it down to their offspring. Having survived my glioblastoma for 10 years, I was less concerned about the endometrial cancer, but however, the thought of passing Lynch syndrome down to my children was very distressing. Over the next 4 years, I remained cancer-free. I felt well, but I was continuing to have issues with my balance and was still having difficulty with stairs and escalators. In particular, I noticed I couldn't stand up in a gusty Wellington wind. If the wind was too strong, it would knock me over or off balance, and I struggled to stand upright. I needed to hold on to something and wait till the gust had passed. Towards the end of 2020, I participated in a fundraising walk for Brain Tumour Support NZ in Palmerston North. The walk was 7 kilometres long, but I could only manage 5 before my legs felt weak and I had to stop. On the trip back to Wellington, I started to experience double vision. And subsequently, I was referred to an ophthalmologist, that's a good word to say, and a neurologist. An MRI and other tests ruled out a recurrence of my brain tumour, but the scan showed evidence of microbleeds. My neurologist said that they were almost certainly caused by the radiation treatment I had had in 2006. At a neurology audit meeting at Wellington Hospital, I was diagnosed with gait dyspraxia and referred to a physiotherapist who was able to help me with my balance and walking. These days, I use a walking pole when I leave the house. I sometimes feel sad about my mobility or lack of it, but I still manage to get out and about. I'm thankful for everyone who has supported me along the way, and I always hoped I would survive to watch my kids grow up, to see them achieve their goals, find their life partners, and so I have. So to me, there's no such thing as false hope.